Ayaw din mag-record pa, ma'am. Ito na. Okay. So, okay. So, ang assignment sa akin, ba na yung hawak ko? Ang assignment sa akin ay 1204 to 1206, no? Pero just a little review. The article before 1200 is 1199. Okay, 1199. So, this whole section from 1199 to 206 talks about alternative prestations, no, alternative options in terms of giving to the creditor or fulfilling the obligation. So na-discuss ko na to sa previous video, pero more likely ang i-discuss natin tomorrow ay yung 1199. So yung a person alternatively bound by different prestations shall completely perform one of them. So in-explain na yun ni Ma'am Belia, and then this is just a rundown. 1200, ayan, na-explain ko na yan. 1201, the choice shall be communicated, no? 1202, the debtor shall lose the right of choice when only one is practicable. 1203, if through the Creditors Act, no? 1203, if through the Creditors Act, the debtor cannot make a choice according to the terms of the obligation. So, pwede siyang mag-rescind, pero hindi siya bound. Okay? So, may options siya dito. So, ang i-discuss ko ngayon ay 1204 to 1206. Medyo mahaba pala siya, no? So, 1204 says that the creditor shall have the right to indemnify for damages when, through the fault of the debtor, all the things which are alternatively the object of the obligation have been lost or the compliance of the obligation has become impossible. So, pag sinabing lost, saan na yun? Ito. Pag sinabing lost, we mean gamit. Okay? Pag sinabing compliance, impossible, ang ibig sabihin natin dyan ay yung to do. Ano ba yun? Undertaking, ganon. To do. Hindi to give. The indemnity shall be fixed taking as a basis the value of the last thing, okay? The last thing which disappeared. So, ibig sabihin, kapag meron kang tatlong options, no? Kapag meron kang tatlong options, yung last, okay, yung last thing na nag-disappear or hindi or naging impossible, no? Okay. Hindi naging hindi na siya possible. So ibig sabihin, dun siya naka-base. Okay, what does this mean? Okay, for example, damages other than the value of the last thing may also be awarded. So, pwede siyang thing, pwede siyang service. Again, to give ang thing, to do ang service. So, loss or becoming impossible. So, for example, some of the objects are lost, no? Or became impossible. So, kahit pa kasalanan ng debtor, hindi siya liable kasi meron yung right of choice at obligation pwede pang ma-perform. So for example, out of the 4, dalawa yung na-lost, no? May option pa siyang dalawa. So ibig sabihin, that's I think parang mas maganda kung may video nga pala. Kasi hindi niyo nakita yung fingers eh. So kung may 4 na objects tapos na-lost yung dalawa, ibig sabihin, hindi pa rin siya liable kasi meron pa siyang option. And remember that the right of choice belongs to the debtor by rule. Okay? So what if naubos lahat? Nawala lahat nung 4 na yon. So the creditor has the right to indemnity for damages. But if the loss is due to fortuitous event, again, obligation is extinguished. Kalimutan ko na ano yan, 1197 or something, nakalimutan ko na. Okay? So the basis of indemnity, the indemnity shall be fixed taking as basis the value of the last thing which disappeared. Okay? Or that of the service which became impossible. So for example, tatlo yon, no? Yung first 2 na items niya, kasalanan niya nawala. Pero sa last thing, fortuitous yung event. No, hindi kasalanan ng debtor. So, yun ang basis ng indemnity. So, ibig sabihin, hindi siya liable for that. Okay. 1205. When the choice has been expressly given to the creditor, the obligation shall cease to be alternative from the day when the selection has been communicated to the debtor. So yung idea natin ng communication is, kung meron kang apat na options, no? At sinabi mo na, ang gusto ko, ang bibigay ko ay yung pangalawa, item 2. It becomes simple. Okay? Hindi na siya alternative obligation, kundi simple na siya, meaning isang bagay lang. So obvious naman yun, no? Kasi kung ang choice nasa debtor, yun yung previous articles. Ngayon, sinasabi niya yung sa creditor. So kapag nag-decide na yung creditor na item 2 yung gusto niya, ibig sabihin it becomes simple. So until then, no, before pa siya mag-communicate ng option niya, until then, the responsibility of the debtor shall be governed by the following rules. If one of the things is lost through fortuitous event, he shall perform the obligation by delivering that which the creditor should choose from among the remainder. Okay? Or that which remains if only one subsists. So, kung tatlo, tapos isa nawala, no? Fortuitous event, meron pang dalawang option. So, pwedeng pumili yung creditor alin doon sa dalawa. Or kung isa na yung natira, pwedeng yun. Number 2, if the loss of one of the things occurs through the fault of the debtor, the creditor may claim any of those subsisting, or the price of that which, through the fault of the former, has disappeared with the right to damages. So, kunyari, tatlo, tapos, kasalanan niya na nawala itong isa, so, pwedeng, one of the things occurs through the fault of the debtor, the creditor may claim any of those subsisting. Pwede siyang pumili dun sa dalawa, or yung presyo nitong nag-disappear. Okay? So, with the right to damages. 3, if all the things are lost through the fault of the debtor, the choice by the creditor shall fall upon the price of any of them, also with indemnity for damages. So, kapag kasalanan ng debtor, nasira lahat ng gamit, so, choice na ng creditor, alin sa presyo ng tatlo ang pipiliin niya. So the same rules shall be applied to obligations to do or not to do in case one, some, or all of the prestations should become impossible. So when a thing is lost through a fortuitous event, ito yung mga examples para mas clear siya. Okay, 6 minutes. S obliged himself to deliver B. So ako, kailangan ko mag-deliver kay Jaudine ng item 1, 2, or 3, or 4. Okay? So if item 1, no, ay nawala sa fortuitous event, si Jaudine, pwede pa siyang pumili dito sa tatlo. Okay? Which remains, okay. Ano daw? B can choose from among the remainder or that which sige. So kung tatlo yung natira, pwedeng pumili si Jaudine dito, pero kung isa na lang, ito na lang yung choice niya. So again, it becomes simple. When a thing is lost through my fault. So if the loss of item 1 occurs through the fault of as my fault, si Jaudine can claim item 2, item 3, or item 4 with a right to damages or the price of item 1 also with a right to damages. So, pwede siyang pumili dito, tapos, or pag pinili niya to, presyo nito, bali hindi na yung gamit kasi lost na siya, presyo na lang nito, tapos right to damages. When all the things are lost, so kung all the items are lost, kasalanan ko, so Jaudine can demand the payment of the price of any of them. So yun yung explanation ko pala kanina. When all the things are lost through a fortuitous. So maraming apat yung scenario, no? Apat yung scenario. Dalawa kasalanan ko, dalawa fortuitous. Okay? So the obligation of S shall be extinguished. Yung obligation ko ay may extinguish if all the items which are alternatively the object of the obligation are lost through a fortuitous event. Article 1174 pala. Okay. 1206. When only one prestation has been agreed upon, no, but the obliger may render another in substitution, the obligation is called facultative. So, ibig sabihin, bukod sa alternative, meron pa tayong tinatawag na facultative. So, the loss or deterioration of the thing intended as a substitute through the negligence of the obliger does not render him liable. But once the substitution has been made, the obliger is liable for the loss of the substitute on account of his delay, negligence, or fraud. So, ibig sabihin, kapag sinabi ko kay Jody na, cellphone na lang yung kapalit nung 20,000 mo. Tapos, pwede akong mag-suggest ng substitute, no? Sabi ko na, pero in that case, no, kung hindi kaya yung cellphone, I will just substitute, no? I will just substitute it with a laptop, ganon. So, kapag nagsabi na siya na laptop na, no? Parang yung sa decision na, nagbigay na siya ng decision niya. Pag sinabing laptop na at agreed upon yun by parties, then that becomes the main object, the main thing, no? So, define muna natin. Facultative obligation is one where only one prestation has been agreed upon, so that's the cellphone, but I may render another in substitution. So, parang sasabihin ko na, pero gusto mo laptop na lang. So, ngayon, what if nawala? No? Pag before the so dalawa yung scenario, guys. Before and after substitution. Kapag before substitution, ang usapan pa namin ay cellphone, hindi pa laptop. So kapag hindi pa nag-decide kung anong substitution, if the principal thing, in this case, the principal thing is the phone. If the phone is lost due to fortuitous, obligation is extinguished. Okay? If the debtor's fault, I am liable. Cellphone pa rin. So, if yung substitute, yung laptop, no? Kahit kasalanan ko or hindi ako liable. Bakit? The theory is, or the maxim is, the thing intended, which is the laptop, as a substitute, is not due. Okay, hindi yung demandable. What if, after substitution, if the principal thing is lost, cellphone, whatever the cause, the debtor is not liable. Kasi hindi na yun yung principal. Ang principal na yung laptop. If the substitute thing is lost, yung laptop, after the substitution na to so meaning, yung laptop, hindi na siya yung substitute. Siya na yung magiging principal supposedly. So if the laptop is lost, the liability of the debtor depends whether or not it's due to my fault. Okay? So once substitution is made, the obligation is converted to simple. Ito na yung pinaka-summary nung facultative. So, based on the preceding example, if item 1 is lost, with or without my fault, I am not liable for its loss since my obligation is to deliver item 2. Okay? Okay. Hindi mo siya nag-gets yan. If item 2 is lost through a fortuitous event, so tatlo to guys. Okay? If item 2 is lost through a fortuitous event, the obligation of S is extinguished. And if item 2 is lost through the fault of S is liable for damages. I think example to sa una, guys, yung kung ano yung last na nawala dun sa options. Dun to sa taas. Okay. Alternative versus, oh my gosh, 11 minutes. Alternative versus facultative distinguished. I'm going to upload this para mas makita ninyo yung difference ng alternative tsaka facultative. So example, ilan yung prestations? Ito, several. Ito, isa lang yung prestation, tapos may isa ring substitute. Okay? Right of choice. Na kanino sabi natin? As alternative, no? Nasa debtor siya by rule, pero pwede nyo siyang ibigay sa creditor or third person, basta expressly given. Sa facultative, only the debtor, tapos loss through fault of the debtor, and then nullity. So yung in-explain ko kanina, ito yon. Ito yung 4 na situations na sinabi ko. So nullity, ayan, meron din siyang 4 under nullity na differences. So alternative obligations and alternative remedies distinguished, no? In ordinary alternative obligations, a mere choice categorically and unequivocally made and then communicated by the person entitled to exercise the option concludes the parties. The creditor may not thereafter exercise any option unless the chosen alternative proves to be ineffectual or unavailing. So, meron kang alternative obligations. Sabi ko, meron akong 4 yung choices ko na pangbayad ko ng 20,000. Okay, ito yung 4. So that those are alternative obligations. Now, for example, no, kapag nasira yung 3, let's say, tapos isa na lang yung natira, no? Tapos hindi na siya, kumbaga, hindi na siya unless the chosen alternative proves to be ineffectual or unavailing. So for example, doon tayo sa to do naman, hindi to give, doon tayo sa act. Sinabi ko na i-renovate ko yung house mo or lalagyan kita ng pool or something or something. Tapos for example, yung alternative niya, bakit mo i-renovate ang bahay ko? Maayos na yung bahay ko. So hindi siya, ineffectual siya. No, ayaw ko siya. So therefore, ito na yung tinatawag na remedy. Pwede na siyang kumuha ng remedy kasi hindi na ano sa kanya, hindi na pabor sa kanya yung alternative obligation. So this rule in essence is the difference between alternative obligations and alternative remedies. Okay? So, yun yung sa akin. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am.
Ma'am,
Wala
sorry, pwede
naman
mo
tayo.
i-repeat yung yung pinaka-gist nung last,
Yung
sinabi
last,
mo. Yeah, yung last.
yung difference. Okay. Basically, ganito. Yung alternative obligations, no? Meaning, si Jowdin, makakapili siya sa 4. So, okay. Okay sa kanya, pwede siyang pumili doon, no? Pero, in the case na wala na siyang ibang options, let's say for example, ang natira na lang is laptop nga, no? Laptop. Tapos, upon the other hand, with the latter case, the choice generally becomes conclusive only upon the exercise of the remedy. So, the remedy is sasabihin niya na hindi ko ito understanding ko ha kasi yung book niya no parang sana ba yung explanation niya. This is 1206 no. Hanggang dito lang talaga explanation niya eh. 1206. So, ang understanding ko is parang lugi ako. Parang lugi ako. So, ito ha. For instance, in one of the remedies expressed in Article 1484 of the Civil Code, it is only when there has been a foreclosure of chattel mortgage that the vendee mortgagor would be permitted to escape from a deficiency liability. Thus, if the case is one for specific performance, even when this action is selected, after the vendee has refused to surrender the mortgage property to permit an extrajudicial foreclosure, that property may still be levied on execution and an alias writ may be issued if the proceeds thereof are insufficient to satisfy the judgment credit. So, also, a mere demand to surrender the object which is not heeded by the mortgagor will not amount to a foreclosure, but the repossession thereof by the vendor mortgagee would have been the effect of the foreclosure. O, di ba? Parang hindi ko masyadong naintindihan yung foreclosure na example niya. So, basically, ang understanding ko is kapag hindi siya umabot sa amount, no? Yung parang hindi hindi fair yung exchange. Hindi na fair yung exchange. For example, like hindi ko alam kung na tackle na natin before yung medyo may sira na siya, parang ganon. So medyo mababa na siya dun sa price niya supposedly. So yun yung understanding ko na pwede ka nang humingi ng remedy na I am not going to choose this one because hindi na siya equal dun sa 20,000 na binigay ko. So yun ay remedy. Pag sinabing alternative obligation, makakapili or may offer pa ako na 4. 'Di ba? So yun. Ito siya. Oo. So once na pumili na siya, done na yon. Pero ang alternative remedies parang magko-complicate yung kaso kasi nga nung kinompute natin, parang hindi siya equal. Hindi siya ano tawag doon? Proportional. So lugi ka as the creditor. Ayun. Ma'am Isabella?
Ay, proceed na pa, ma'am. 12:07. Try ko po mag-share screen through my phone. Hindi po ako naka-experience pero try ko
Pwede,
lang.
pwede.
Ah, okay. May na ano po, ma'am? Or hindi siya?
Okay naman. Pwede mong i-ano yung phone mo. Ano tawag doon? Yung pahiga? Landscape?
Okay, wait.
Oo.
Try.
Try lang. Try lang.
Ako. Ay, sorry. Wala.
Pero we can also follow din sa book if you want.
Sige, ganun na lang po, ma'am.
Sure, nahirapan ka? Sige,
Medyo
sige.
baka pwede follow na lang. Book lang man din,
1207,
Delayon.
okay.
Apo. Delayon lang man din po yung gamit ko. Okay. So, Section 4, Section 4, Joint and Solidary Obligations. I'll start with 1207. So 1207 states that the concurrence of two or more creditors or of two or more debtors in one and the same obligation does not imply that each of the former has the right to demand or that each of the latter is bound to render the entire compliance with the prestation. There is solidary liability only when the obligation expressly so states or when the law or the nature of the obligation requires solidarity. So this intro lang muna. Individual obligation, there is one obligor and one obligee. So like one debtor and one creditor. In collective obligation, there are two or more debtors and two or more creditors. So dito na belong si joint and solidary obligation. So joint obligation, it means na yung obligation is paid or fulfilled proportionately. So if there are three debtors divided by 3. So let's say 6,000 yung utang. So if you three are jointly liable, so you get to pay, you are liable for 2,000 each. So that is joint obligation. While solidary obligation, which means example ako tapos meron kayo, for example, meron kayo tatlo po, ma'am, utang sa akin na 6,000. So if joint obligation siya, si Ma'am Jahada, si Ma'am Mariam, and si Ma'am Aishia, you are all liable to me 2,000 each, joint, which is proportionate. Pero when the obligation is solidary, it means na I can approach Ma'am Aishia and ask 6,000 full payment. So, yun yung meaning nun. So, I can approach any one of the three to comply with the whole payment. So, tapos si Ma'am Aishia, siya na lang bahala masingil si Ma'am Jahada and Ma'am Mariam about their share, which is 2,000 each. So, parang ganun yung solidary. So, pag joint obligation, I cannot comply Ma'am Aishia to pay 6,000. The limit that she can pay me is 2,000 lang talaga kasi joint man. So, proportion lang din talaga yung makukuha niya makukuha ko sa kanya. So, ganun ang meaning ng joint obligation. Then, solidary obligation is not presumed. So, kung walang sinabi yung agreement, like sinabi lang na the three of you, ma'am, are indebted of 6,000 to me, ganun, it, it is presumed na joint siya. Because solidary liability is not presumed. Pag when you say solidary yung isang utang, it means na sinabi talaga sa agreement itself. So if hindi, except unless otherwise stated, an obligation is joint. Kasi pag joint obligation kasi mas madali siya sa utak sa lahat kasi fair kaysa magsabi pag solidary, bakit ako siya na lang paningilan mo? Bakit ganun? So, ganun yung sinabi ng law. So, unless otherwise stated, joint yung isang obligation. So, Article 1208, if from the law or the nature of the wording of the obligations to which preceding article refers, the contrary does not appear, that credit or debt shall be presumed to be divided into as many equal shares as there is creditors, and the debts are being distinct from one another. So, ito na yung point ng, ma'am?
Mute please, Ma'am Mariam. Thank you.
Okay. So ito na yung meaning ng 1208. So yung sabi ng 1208, parang yung first sentence niya, unless sinabi or nasa law or nasa nature ng wording ng agreement nyo, there is as many shares as there is a many credit debtors. So parang kung may tatlong debtors, may tatlong utang. Pero ganun yung joint. So pag may tatlong debtors, may tatlong utang, which is 2,000 each. Pero pag solidary, which is stated sa agreement nyo, kung may tatlong debtors, isa lang ang utang. Kasi any a creditor can just approach any one of the debtor and ask for the full payment. So, ganun lang yung meaning ng 1207 and 1208. Tapos, meron kasi din, as I search, baka mag-ask si attorney, kasi there are instances na hindi na kailangan i-state sa agreement na ano siya, na solidary yung obligation. Because there are times na but the law itself requires the obligation to be solidary. So, sinerch ko sorry, exit ko muna yung camera ko para makita ko yung file. So, okay, so the obligations that are solidary according to law na daan is arising from tort, ay, arising from quasi-contracts, mga felony, or yun na yung mga more on criminal act. Yun yung nakita ko sa internet about solidary obligations arising from law, more on sa mga tort, quasi-contracts, and yung yung liability ng principal, accomplice, and accessory to the crime. Ganon. Solidary yung mga obligations nila daan. So, so yun na. So, meron din dito mga terms, page 154. Meron dito terms that indicates joint liability. So, pag nakita mo sa agreement, na mancomunada mente, pro rata, proportionately, tapos meron nakasabi sa promissory note na we promise to pay, kasi it means na joint yung obligation. Tapos pag solidary naman, makikita mo sa agreement na jointly and severally. I know parang nakakaano kasi may word na joint. Pero when you say jointly and severally, it means solidary obligations. Tapos also another word for solidary obligation is solidaria, in solidum. Tapos pag magsabi sila sa promissory note, even though there are 3 debtors, magsabi sila, I promise to pay. So parang singular lang, even though there are 3 debtors. That means solidary obligations. So, ganun yung intro lang ng difference ng joint and solidary obligation. So, madami din dito mga examples like mga active solidarity, passive solidarity. So, parang passive solidarity is on the, as you see, di ba, passive is like, passive is the debtor, so the one who will fulfill the obligation. So, when you say passive solidarity, the solidarity is in the part of the debtor. So, parang solidarity yung solidary liable ang debtor. So, like, I can just, kung kayo po yung solidary debtor, so I can just approach anyone to fulfill the whole obligation. There is also active solidarity. This is solidarity on the part of the creditor. So, let's say isa lang yung may utang tapos kayo po yung pinag-uutangan ko, 6,000. So, kung sa solidarity liable ako sa inyo po. So, any one of you can demand to me 6,000 na, diretso. Ganun. Parang you can be solidarily liable to your creditor, and the creditor can also be solidarily have the right to ano. So, parang ganun yung idea niya. So, the solidarity can be on the part of the creditor and on the part of the debtor. Depende kung ilan, kasi there can also be 2 or more creditor and debtor. So, last part of 1208 is yun na, it is solidarity is not presumed. So, unless otherwise not joint yung isang obligation. 1209, if the division is impossible, the right of the creditor may be prejudiced only by their collective acts, and the debt can be enforced only by proceeding against all debtors. If one of the latter should be insolvent, the other should be not liable for his share. So, ang mean lang nito is yung joint indivisible obligation. So, let's say, kayo po tatlo, ma'am, is may liability na mag-give sa akin ng car. So, joint siya since you are jointly liable, pero indivisible kasi hindi naman pwede mahati-hati yung car. So, jointly liable kayo, but the object or the prestation is not divisible. Other words niyan, parang kung kayo, yung dalawa lang po ang gusto or willing mag-fulfill ng obligation and the other one does not, So, yung dalawa na gusto mag-fulfill ng obligation shall not be liable for any damages, for any delay, ganun, or ganun. So, if may nangyari man na delay, since liable na for damages, yung si unwilling debtor lang yung may responsibility to fulfill the damages that I will ask since hindi na fulfill on time dahil yun nga, unwilling si isang debtor. So, yun na. Tapos, the second sentence din also dito, pag naging insolvent yung isang debtor, hindi responsibility nung ibang debtors na magtapal muna sa kanya. So parang, oh, bayaran lang namin, share namin sa liability, pero wala na kaming paki kung fulfill ba niya kasi insolvent siya. So as a creditor, all I can do is wait for him to be able to pay his share of the debt. Parang ganun lang. Kasi parang kawawa din yung ibang debtor kasi madamay. Parang ganun siya yung ano. So, kung sino yung may problema, he should bear his own burden kasi hindi pwede madamay yung ibang debtor sa kanya. Parang yun lang yung idea niya dito sa 1209. So 1210, the indivisibility of an obligation does not necessarily give rise to solidarity, nor does solidarity itself imply indivisibility. So, dito sa 1210, as I've read, nilagay lang yung difference between indivisibility and solidarity. So, indivisibility refers to the object, the prestation. So, like, for example, a car. So, hindi man matchap-chap yung car. Whereas, yung solidarity refers to the obligation or yung responsibilidad mo. So, it doesn't mean na indivisible yung object, dapat solidary na. So, when say car, so pwede pa rin na joint yung obligation. So, tatlong debtor tatlong debtor, kailangan pa rin nila i-fulfill yung utang na car. Kasi different ang solidarity sa indivisibility. And also, let's say, let's say, paano ba yun, indivisible? Pag let's say isa lang, yung ano naman, solidary obligation, let's say money, ma-divide man ang money, pero divisible ang money kasi of course we can pay naman. Divisible ang money, pero it doesn't mean na jointly na agad. It could also be solidarity. So I can, I mean, it doesn't mean na pera yung kailangan ibayad, pwede na siya mahati-hati. It also can mean na pwede ko rin siya pwede rin tayo mag-agree na sa isa lang ako I can choose whoever I want to singil na debtor. Parang ganun lang yung meaning ng 1210. So, there are examples here sa pinakalas na siya before mag 1211. Number 1, A and B are jointly liable to deliver C a particular car. So, the prestation is the car, which is indivisible. Pero si A and B, jointly liable. So, it doesn't mean na car, which is indivisible, dapat solidarity na yung relationship between the debtor and creditor. So, jointly liable si A and B, pero indivisible yung prestation. Number 2, A and B oblige themselves solidary to give car to C who have so ito, solidary na, indivisible pa. So sa car, si car is indivisible and A and B are solidary. So A or B can comply with the obligation. So hindi nila dapat sabay lang iganon. So pwede si A lang or si B lang. Number 3, solidary obligation does not necessarily mean that the obligation is also indivisible. So, ito na yung point ko kanina. Even though there are 2 or more debtors, A and B, tapos 10,000. Ang 10,000, madali lang ihati, 5,000, 5,000. But it doesn't mean na nahahati man yung 10,000, hindi na pwede maging solidary. Pwede pa rin maging solidary even though yung object is divisible. Number 4, if A and B are jointly liable for 1,000, so we have joint and divisible. Since 1,000 is money, easily divided into 500, 500. Plus, sinabi pa na si A and B are jointly, which means hatiin nila. So, ako as creditor, I can only ask maximum of 500 from A and I can only ask maximum of 500 from B. Parang yun siya. Yun lang po yung ano niya, yung difference between joint and solidary obligations.
Thank you, Ma'am Bella. Actually, i-send ko sa yung PDF ha, kasi parang magkaiba na yung book natin.
Ay, hala.
Oo,
Ano
isa-send
ba
ko
to siya?
sa'yo.
2014. 2014 to siya na
Oo,
libro
yung
na
example
version.
mo na 1,000, 10,000 na
Mm.
siya.
Ay,
Oo. Oo.
okay.
Oo.
2014 pa to siya. Old siguro, old version na to.
So
Sige
may
po, ma'am.
may tanong tayo kay Bella. Ma'am, pwedeng request ako dun sa, hindi ko kasi masyadong na-catch. Pero yung kung
Yes,
okay
ma'am.
lang, kahit sa phone lang, tapos screenshot or something, kung
Yes,
okay
ma'am.
lang na i-list yung Solidaria, yung torts, yung mga medyo foreign terms for me.
Saan po? Ay, yung term
Yung,
that means
oo, yung mga
solidary and yung term.
Solidaria. Tapos may isa pa, dalawa pa, parang Spanish din yata yun na terms.
Oo, sige po. I-screenshot
Oo.
ko po then i-send ko sa GC natin, ma'am.
Oo. Kung notes na para mas naka-digest na siya. Okay.
What notes? Okay.
Parang
Pero
ganito,
meron
parang ganito. Yan. Naka-digest na to, ma'am. For me.
Okay.
Yes.
Sige. So, try ko later or tomorrow,
Oo.
i-digest siya kasi more on book lang kasi ako. So,
Oo.
tamad
Kahit sa
magsulat.
phone, kahit sa phone
Oo.
lang, ma'am, yung definitions lang. Tapos maganda po yung inad mo na saan natin kinukuha yung idea ng solidary and no. So,
Mm-mm.
I think clear yung kay Ma'am Bella na it depends on the people and the thing, no?
Yes,
So,
ma'am.
okay, I think clear naman yun. So, kasi ako yung magja-jump doon eh. After ni Ma'am Bella, maikli lang to guys, don't worry. So, coming from 1210, no, 1211, solidarity or solidary ba to, may exist although the creditors and the debtors may not be bound in the same manner and by the same periods and condition. Ito na. I think si Ma'am Mariam yung mas mahirap ang i-discuss mamaya. Pero sa akin, introduction to. Na yung sinabi kasi kanina ni Ma'am Bella is fair lang eh. Di ba? Pag joint, 500-500. Pag solidary, no, parang equal sila. This time, iba yung period at iba din yung condition ng mga involved. Okay? So, kinds of solidary obligation according to the legal type. Meron tayong tinatawag na uniform. So, uniform is when the parties are bound by the same stipulations or clauses. Pero meron din tayong tinatawag na non-uniform or varied. So, this is when the parties are not subject to the same stipulations or clauses. Okay? So, joint obligation on one side, solidary on the other. So, dalawa siya. Any obligation may be joint on the side of the creditors and solidary on the side of the debtors. Okay? Or vice versa. So, pwedeng joint ang creditors, solidary ang debtors. Okay? Tapos alam na natin, sa solidary, pwedeng singilin, kahit isa sa kanila, singilin yung total amount. Yun yung na-explain ni Ma'am Bella kanina. So, vice versa yon, no? Thus, if the obligation is joint on the side of the creditor, so pag joint, no, alam na natin yung joint, meron silang specific, no, pantay sila, pro rata ba yung tawag? Okay, so if the obligation is joint on the side of the creditors and solidary on the side of the debtors, each creditor can demand only his share. So for example, creditor si Ma'am Bella, no? Creditor tayong tatlo, tapos ang nangutang ay si Jowdin and others, no? So kung tatlo tayo, 6,000 yon, ang pwede ko lang hingiin kay Jowdin ay yung 2,000. Okay? But each debtor may be compelled to pay the entire obligation to the creditors. Okay? So ibig sabihin yun na nga yung sinasabi na kapag kasi, anong tawag doon? Solidary man yung debtor. Na-discuss natin to nung first sem. Tapos si Miss Dagalea pa nga yung nagtatanong, di ba? Yung kapag nagsasign siya nung mga umuutang doon sa DepEd. So, ganun yun. The idea is, pwede siyang singilin dahil nag-co-maker siya. So, solidary yun. 1,212 each one of the solidary creditors. So, solidary. Ano na sila ngayon? Hindi na joint, okay? Each one of the solidary creditors may do whatever may be useful to the others, but not anything which may be prejudicial to the latter. So, for example, a solidary creditor may do any act beneficial or useful to the others, but he cannot perform any act prejudicial to them. Sa book, meron siyang example. Pero for example, nag-demand siya ng money, no? Nag-demand siya ng money. Yung idea doon is, ang nabasa ko, ang naalala ko is, it stops the, yung prescription. Kasi nagbigay ka na ng demand letter. So, it stops the running of the prescription. So, nag-demand na kayo sa mga umutang. Therefore, beneficial yon because you are reminding the whole of the debtors about their debt to the creditors. No? So, basta beneficial. Wag lang prejudicial. Okay? Like, for example, nagpa-dali-dali siya, gano'n. Tapos, kunyari, sinabihan na siya ng debtor, sir, magbabayad na ako, sir, ganyan-ganyan. Tapos, parang binalewala niya, gano'n. So, ang mangyayari, maglalapse, no? Maglalapse. So, magiging prejudicial yon sa kanyang mga co-creditors. So, ito yung pinaka-main. Oo. Siguro we can go back to the book, for example. 1213, in the absence of consent given by the others, a solidary creditor cannot assign his rights to a third person. So remember, a solidary contract of creditors, hindi basta-basta, no? In fact, invalid kapag inassign mo yung rights mo sa isang third person. So, suppose a solidary creditor did assign his rights. Will payment to the assignee, so for example, may umutang sa ating apat, no? May umutang sa ating apat. Tapos sabi ko, yung sister ko na lang, i-assign ko na lang siya dun sa rights ko. Tapos wala sa wala sa consent yung tatlo. So, will the payment to the assignee extinguish the obligation? So, Article 1213 seems to imply that such assignment is invalid in the first place. So, hindi pwedeng mag-entra ka ng ibang tao na hindi naman involved. So, my last article is 1214. The debtor may pay any one of the solidary creditors, but if any demand, judicial or extrajudicial, has been made by one of them, no, payment should be made to him. Okay? So, for example, payment to any of the solidary creditors. The rule is that the debtor may pay any one of the solidary creditors, but when a demand, judicial or extrajudicial, has been made by one of them to avoid confusion as well as prejudice to the more diligent creditor, payment should be made to him. So, for example, tayong apat, creditors tayo, nagpautang tayo, no? Tapos, yung masipag sa atin, let's say, for example, si Jowdin, siya yung nag-demand. Asa na yung payment, no? So, yung debtor, ibabayad niya kay Jowdin. So, what is the presumption here? The presumption here is, dahil solidary tayo, hindi naman itatangay yun ni Jowdin. Okay? So, dahil nagkataon lang na siya yung masipag, siya yung nag-demand, at nagbayad yung debtor, sa kanya ibabayad. Pero, dahil solidary nga, magbe-benefit tayo doon. Tayong apat. Okay? So, ayun. Mayroon po bang question?
May question ako, ma'am.
Try
Hindi
ko.
kasi hindi ako sure kasi paano nag-work yung solidary. Like, ano yun siya? Yung pera na pinapautang, necessarily, like, pera nila yung lahat. Meaning, like, for example, sa lending companies, for example, parang yung mga may-ari nun. So, if magpapautang sila, considered yun as solidary. Curious lang.
Ma'am Jowdin, kasama ba yan sa'yo? Parang narinig ko may corporation ka na.
Hindi, ma'am, tingin ko lang, parang corporation yata yung pinag-uusapan sa akin. Yung tingin ko lang. I think so.
Ma'am Bella, may idea ka? Kasi kung solidary yung, kung solidary kasi yung debtor, madaling maintindihan. Pero paano daw po yung solidary yung creditors? How does that look like?
Solidary. So, kung solidary yung debtors, di ba? So, any creditor can go to any debtor like, ma'am, pwede mahingi sa'yo yung full payment, ganun. Oo. Pero kung creditor yung solidary kasi, it means na ako, parang, paano ba siya? Meron to dito ewan ko kung anong page siya sa ano.
Oo nga
Meron
eh.
dito yung active solidarity. So, basahin ko lang sa akin ha. Active solidarity on the part of the creditor where any one of them can demand the fulfillment of the obligation. Whereas kung passive solidarity, which is solidarity on the part of the, ano siya, kinds of solidarity yung term niya, ma'am, sa book. Kung passive, so si debtor, anywhere where any one of them can be made, sorry sa dog sa labas, where any one of them can be made liable for the fulfillment of the entire obligation. Parang same lang siya kasi kung si creditor yung ay si debtor yung solidarity, it means I should be prepared na kung maningil sa akin si creditor na, "Uy, bayaran mo yung full." So wala akong magawa kasi solidarity debtor ako. Pero whereas kung si creditor, kung solidarity debtor, it means I can demand the full payment. So kailangan solidarity yung creditor para maka-demand siya ng full payment sa solidarity na debtor. Whereas pero yung sa topic mo po, Ma'am Aishia, yung non-uniform ba yun? Yun yung dun
Oo.
talaga ako medyo
Si Ma'am Mariam yon.
nabubulungan.
Oo. Hayaan na natin si Jow din dyan.
Okay, go.
Pero,
Kasi hindi ako.
Oo, maganda Ma'am Bella. Now I'm reminded. Pag active, creditor ang solidary. Pag passive, debtor.
Debtor.
Okay, so yun ang
Kasi
ano
di ba
natin.
yung ano?
Yun ang recall
Okay.
words natin. Okay, thank you ma'am.
Sige na, welcome.
Ako na ba?
Ma'am, matulog tayo ngayon ha. Huwag mong habaan.
Ay, nako. Hindi ako mahirap tong topic ko. I think so. Para sa akin, mahirap siya. Okay.
Sige,
I'll do my best.
Sunod kami sa libro, girl. Share ka na ng screen.
Okay, wait lang ha. Mag-share screen ako. Bale, nakadata lang ako. Sabihan nyo lang ako pag hindi na ako marinig or...
Oh my. Hindi ka na marinig.
Ano ba ito? Hindi na ako marinig?
Dapat pala sinend mo sa akin yung
Nakashare-
PowerPoint mo.
Oo, no? Nakikita nyo ba?
Hindi.
Naka-share screen?
Wala.
Wala?
Try mo i-off yung cam mo
Ganyan,
muna.
wala?
Para less yung ano,
Oh, sige, sige.
less yung data consumption mo.
Okay, wait for a while. So, present natin, window. Ito. Okay na?
Kaya mo nang madalian i-send sa sa Messenger? Hindi. Kung kaya mo lang.
Try. Kasi yung copy na sa
Shopee.
wait lang. Oh my God, wait lang.
Ayan, nagdalawang ka na, dalawang... Makikita nyo naman, guys, no? Ayan.
Yung PowerPoint.
May nangyayari na. Sandali. Pero picture mo lang, girl.
What? Sa cellphone lang, kaya ko lang sa cellphone.
Yeah, better.
Okay.
Okay, next time send nyo na yung material sa just in case. Ako, yung notes ko ay nandun na sa folder.
Ganun na lang ata po, ma'am. Kasi cellphone lang talaga kasi gamit ko. So,
Oo.
siguro yun na lang yung way.
Correct.
Sige.
Oo, okay lang. Kahit ano lang nga, screenshot ng notes, okay na yun. Naka-cellphone ka na, Mariam? Hirap no, ng internet.
Hello?
Sinashare mo na? Oy,
Naririnig ako.
medyo. Choppy. Paano ba 'to? Ayan, is presenting. Nakikita ko na. Ayan na, may light na. There's light.
Okay na, okay na.
Oo, puwedeng i-landscape mo din, tulad nung kay Bella?
Oh, for a while.
Oo, sige.
O, ganyan. Nakikita mo?
Parang naglo-load siya. Okay. Oo. Oo,
Pwede
nakikita
lang.
ko na.
Ha? Then, hindi na siya tapos share screen mo na lang yung libro na lang siguro.
Okay, sige, noted.
Oo, ganun na lang. Okay, so
Okay na.
topic ko. Okay na. So, Article 1215. Naririnig niyo ako?
Oo.
Klaro
Ang
lang po.
tagal, ang dami. Oo, klaro. Ang dami ko kasing nina-navigate, girl.
Okay, Article 1215, novation, compensation, confusion, or remission of the debt made by any of the solidary creditors or with any of the solidary debtors shall extinguish the obligation without prejudice to the provisions of Article 1219. So, merong apat na words dito: novation, compensation, confusion, or remission. Lahat itong apat na ito will extinguish the obligation. So, in passing lang, no, this is according to na-search ko sa net, although this is my first time to hear these words or na-encounter yung words na to. So, for novation, ang sabi dito, novation in contract of law and business law is the act of replacing an obligation to perform with another obligation or adding an obligation to perform or replacing a party to an agreement of a new party. Bale, ganito siya. Pwede mong masasabing novation siya if ganito yung nangyari. For example, let's say for example, ako, si Mariam, and si Ma'am Kunting, may utang kami kay Ma'am Jahada. Now, may utang kaming 1 million pesos. But Ma'am Kunting opted to, instead of magbigay siya ng 1 million peso or magbigay kami ng 1 million peso, car na lang yung ibibigay niya. So, may extinguish na yung obligation na 1 million peso because there is modification. And another obligation will, magkakaroon ng another obligation of which yun na in the form of the car. And then, there is another example din dito. Aside doon sa modification, meron din tayong number 2 is substituting the person of the debtor. So, yung debtor magsa-substitute into another person. So, if after the constitution of the obligation, both parties agreed that, for example, si Ma'am Kunting will substitute for Ma'am Bella, or that Ma'am Jehada will subrogate to the rights of Ma'am of me, there is a personal novation. In this case, CAF becomes the new debtor or Dan the new creditor, as the case may be. And then the third is subrogating a third person in the rights of the creditor. So if the agreement of the parties is that Simon will deliver to Dan the 10 air conditioner instead of Simon delivering a car to Ben, then there is a mixed novation because the object of the obligation and the person of the creditor are changed. Basta pag sinabi nating novation, there is modification. So it's either yung object, instead of pera yung ibibigay na pambayad, gagawin na lang car, yun yung first object. Second is, isa-substitute yung debtor, instead na yung debtor, kunyari, originally si Ma'am Kunting, magiging si Ma'am Bella na siya because nag-substitute. And then the third is subrogating a third person in the rights of the creditor. Usually, pwede ito in cases of insurance companies. Although itong novation, madi-discuss din ito sa next chapter. So, hindi ko na siya i-discuss talaga in detail. Basta ito yung one reason for extinguishment of obligation. Basta novation, it's more about modification. Nagbabago yung obligation ng instead of yung object ganito, nagbago sa another object, and then yung debtor na substitute to another debtor, and then yung creditor na subrogate sa third party. And then compensation naman, for compensation, parang yung the creditor and the debtor will be the creditor and debtor of each other. Parang, for example, si Ma'am Kunting, may utang ako sa kanya na 500,000. Tapos, si Ma'am Kunting, meron din siyang utang sa akin na sabihin natin na car na 500,000 din. So, parang quits lang, no? Kasi is the compensation, ang sabi dito, compensation is a mode of extinguishment of obligation wherein there is a simultaneous balancing or weighing of two obligations of two persons who are reciprocally debtors and creditors of each other. Parang both sila may utang sa each other. Both sila kailangan magbayad sa each other. But it doesn't necessarily mean na kailangan parehas yung amount ng debt nila. Basta as long as pag sinabing compensation, the other one will compensate for the other, tapos yung isa naman magko-compensate din for the other kasi pareho silang may obligation to each other. And for confusion naman, ang confusion is, or merger ang tawag dito, the rights is a mode of extinguishment of obligation wherein the character or qualities of the creditor and debtor are merged in the same person. An obligation is extinguished if the debtor also becomes the creditor, since one cannot claim against himself. So ang nangyari dito sa confusion, yung debtor na siya, naging creditor pa siya. So ganito ang example. Ito nakita ko lang ito sa YouTube, tinignan ko kanina. Sabi, for example, ako, may utang ako at si Ma'am Aisha kay Ma'am Belia. So, meron kaming utang, for example, 10,000 tapos used in a promissory note. Ngayon, si Ma'am Bella, tinransfer niya kay Ma'am Jihada yung promissory note. Tapos, si Ma'am Jihada naman, for example, binigay niya kay Ma'am, kay Attorney Leong. Tapos si Attorney Leong, binalik niya yung promissory na punta na naman kay Ma'am Kunting. So si Ma'am Kunting, di ba kanina debtor siya. Tapos nabalik sa kanya, naging creditor na naman siya. So there is confusion sa obligation wherein yung debtor and yung debtor naging simultaneously naging creditor din siya. Okay, so next is remission. Ang remission naman is cancellation of creditor ng obligation. So I don't think na kailangan ko pa siya explain. Basta yung, for example, yung parang nilibre na ba? Parang nilibre na ng creditor na hindi na niya ipabayad yung debtor, na i-cancel na niya yung obligation ng debtor. So yun, apat, novation, compensation, confusion, and remission of debt, lahat ito ma-extinguish yung obligation pag nagkaroon ng ganitong situation. Novation, compensation, confusion, or remission of the debt made by any of the solidary creditors or with any of the solidary debtors will extinguish, but without prejudice to the provisions of Article 1 to 19. So yung Article 1 to 19, i-discuss yan later, I think, ni Ma'am Jihada. So the creditor who may have executed any of these acts, as well as he who collects the debt, shall be liable to the others for the share in the obligation corresponding to them. So for example, si Ma'am Aisha at ako, may utang kami kay Ma'am Belia na sabihin natin ulit 1 million. May utang kami, ako solidary debtor ako, si Ma'am Aisha at saka ako solidary solidary debtor, tapos solidary creditor si Ma'am Jehada at saka si Ma'am Bella. So, nag-decide si Ma'am Kunting, si Ma'am Aisha na instead of 1 million peso, ang babayaran namin is car na lang. So, nagbayad siya ng car kay Ma'am Bella, binigay niya yung car, but ako, hindi ako pumayag. And ayokong mag-consent to that. And then si Ma'am Jehada naman, hindi din siya nag-consent. So, yung tumanggap, which is nag-collect ng debt na si Ma'am Bella, will be liable to the other creditor. Others, ang minimin dito sa others is the other creditor, which is Ma'am Jehada, for the share and the obligation corresponding to them. So, maghahatian sila. So, it's either na si Ma'am Bella, babayaran niya ng 500,000 pesos na lang si Ma'am Jehada kasi ayaw man niya ng car, hindi man siya nag-consent. So, kailangan yung nag-collect ng debt will be liable na i-share yung obligation corresponding to them. That is Article 1 to 15. Klaro lang ba?
Yes.
Okay, so Article 1 to 16 tayo. So ito medyo easy-easy na siya. The creditor may proceed against any one of the solidary debtors or some or all of them simultaneously. The demand made against one of them shall not be an obstacle to those which may subsequently be directed against the others so long as the debt has not been fully collected. So for example, sabihin natin na ang solidary debtor si Ma'am Bella and si Ma'am Jehada. Dalawa sila debtors. And then ang mga dalawa silang creditors. And then ang mga debtors marami. Debtors ako, si Ma'am Aisha, si Attorney Leong, si Dean Jules, lahat sila mga debtor. So, pwedeng pumili yung creditor, anyone, kung sino gusto niyang singilin. Sabi niya, gusto ko singilin si Attorney Leong kasi maraming pera. So, pwede niya isingil kay Attorney Leong. Pwede din niya isingil sa dalawa or pwede din niya isingil sa lahat as one, simultaneously. So, pwede simultaneous, magsisingilin niya lahat na kailangan magbayad sila ng obligations nila. As long as hindi pa fully collected yung lahat ng debt, pwedeng singil yung mga creditors. So, one debtor, two debtor, all simultaneously, lahat ng debtors sisingilin. So, ganun lang naman sa Article 1 to 16. Tapos, dito sa Article 1 to 17, this is, merong computation involved, I think, with this one. So, okay, I'll read this. Payment made by one of the solidary debtors extinguishes the obligation. If two or more solidary debtors offer to pay, the creditor may choose which offer to accept. Okay, so merong isang solidary debtors. Okay, sabi niya, siya na yung magbabayad para sa lahat. Siya yung magbabayad. Sabihin natin yung mga debtors, ako, si Ma'am Aisha, si Dean Jules, si Attorney Leong, tapos ang mga creditors si Ma'am Jehada at saka si Ma'am Bella. So, nag-volunteer si Dean Jules na siya na yung magbayad para sa lahat. So, pwede niya yon gawin. Now, if two or more solidary debtors offer to pay, for example, si Attorney Leong at saka si Dean Jules, nag-offer sila magbayad, pwede pumili si Ma'am Jehada at saka si Ma'am Bella kung sino yung gusto nilang i-accept sa dalawang magbabayad. Now, ano yung mangyayari doon sa mga co-debtors? Kasi di ba hindi naman sila nagbayad. Yung nagbayad is si Dean Jules or kung hindi si Attorney Leong. He who made the payment may claim from his co-debtors only the share which corresponds to each with the interest for the payment already made. If the payment is made before the debt is due, no interest for the intervening period may be demanded. So, for example, ang date ng due ng pagbayad ng utang is, sabihin natin, June 25. Tapos nagbayad si Attorney Leong ng June 20. So, nagbayad siya before the due date. Ngayon, magsisingil na siya doon sa ibang mga debtors ng binayad niya. So, for example, ang utang is 1 million, tapos 5 yung debtor. So, sisingilin niya each ng 200,000. Yung each debtor, magsingil siya kay Ma'am Kunting, sa akin, kay Tin Jules, and for example, si Ma'am Ujayma, so 5 kami, 200, 200. Ngayon, kapag nagbayad, for example, ako, June 25 yung due, tapos nagbayad ako sa kanya ng lampas na sa due. So nagbayad ako mga July na. Instead of June 25, nakabayad na ako ng July. So meron akong interest additional na babayaran bukod doon sa 200,000 na kailangan kong bayaran as co-debtors na sinolder na muna ni Attorney Leong. So babayaran ko yung 200,000 at saka dahil late ako nagbayad, beyond the due na, so meron akong interest na babayaran ulit kay Attorney Leong. But if nagbayad naman din lahat before the due, before June 25 or on June 25, wala nang additional na interest na babayaran. So, 200,000 lang lahat yung babayaran ng each debtor.
Naubos ba? Naubos ba yung data niya? I think yun, no? Dali ha. Jihada, anong article ka?
1219 po, ma'am.
1219. So may 1218 pa siya.
Meron pang isa.
Payment by a solidary debtor shall not entitle him to reimbursement from his co-debtors if such payment is made after the obligation has prescribed or become illegal. Okay.
Hello.
Go.
Wait. Sorry na, data lang talaga yung gamit ko. Okay, next na tayo. Saan na yung 1 to...
1217 ka kanina. Proceed na. 17 ka kanina.
Okay, 1 to 17. Okay. Pwede punta doon sa 1217, ma'am. Kasi I cannot see. Okay, dyan. Sige. Next is the third paragraph na tayo, which when one of the solidary debtors cannot, because of his insolvency, reimburse share to the debtor paying the obligation, such share shall be borne by all his co-debtors in proportion of the debt of each. Now, for example, di ba nagbayad si Atty. Leong para sa aming 5 ng 1 million. So lahat kami, merong utang kanya na 200,000 na kailangan bayaran. Now, for example, sabihin natin si Ma'am Ujayma, insolvent siya. So, dahil insolvent si Ma'am Ujayma, hindi siya makabayad. Sino yung magbabayad para kay Ma'am Ujayma? Ang sabi dito, the obligation such share shall be borne by all his co-debtors in proportion to the debt of each. Now, since it's 200,000, i-divide sa 4 na natira na hindi insolvent. So, 200,000 divided by 4, magbabayad sila ng additional of 50,000. 50,000 ba? Oo, 50,000. So, yung babayaran nila each is 250,000. Kasi yung sila muna mag-shoulder doon sa utang ng insolvent. Yung mga co-debtors na hindi insolvent. Okay, next ma'am, paki-move konti. Okay,
Ganyan?
doon na tayo sa
Dito?
example, ma'am.
Example, okay. Dali.
Oo.
Ito. Okay.
Doon na tayo, yan. Ayan. Okay, sige. Number 1, sabi dito, A, B, and C are jointly and severally liable. Sabi nga ni Ma'am Usabella kanina, pag jointly and severally liable, meaning solidary debtors. So yung A, B, and C, sabihin natin, magbigay na lang tayo ng pangalan para mas easier to remember. For example, ako si A, si B si Ma'am Kunting, tapos si C si Ma'am Usabella. Are severally liable to D, to Ma'am Jihada, and E, sabihin natin yung E si Attorney Leong. If ako and si Ma'am Kunting magbabayad kay Jihada on January 5, the latter may choose which offer to accept. So kung ako, sabihin ko magbabayad ako ng 3,000 on January 5, obligation is extinguished. So mawawala na yung obligation, which is 3,000. The payment na binigay ko, meron akong right mag-demand ng reimbursement from B, which is Ma'am Kunting, and kay C, kay Ma'am Bella, ng 1,000 each. Kasi ako, yung due na babayaran ko for each, dahil tatlo kami, 1,000. So, meron silang kailangan i-reimburse sa akin na 1,000 each with interest from the date of the payment should sumobra yung day kung kailan ko siya binayaran. But A is not entitled to reimbursement nor to interest for any payment made before January 5. The obligation of B and C to reimburse him with interest will arise only from January 5. If C is insolvent, so si Mambela insolvent, both A and B shall bear his insolvency in proportion to their shares. So di ba yung each babayaran is 1,000 pesos. So since insolvency si Mambela, si C, kaming dalawa ni Ma'am Kunting ang magbabayad for her. So for example, that's 1,000, i-divide sa aming dalawa, so magbabayad kami 500 each. Instead of 1,000, 1,500 na yung babayaran namin. Of course, A, ako, and B, Ma'am Kunting, can later on recover from should the latters, Ma'am? Ma'am Kunting?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Okay. The pay, saan ako?
Number 2 ba?
Okay,
Number 2.
should the, yes, wait. Should the latter's finances improve? So, di ba insolvent si Ma'am Bella? Pwede pa rin namin yan ma-recover kay Ma'am Bella if her finances will eventually improve. But since kailangan ng bayaran, due na siya, so yung ibang co-debtor, siya muna yung mag-shoulder ng debt ng isa na insolvent. If in the same example, A paid only, nagbayad ako ng 2,400. And B, nagbayad siya ng 600 si Ma'am Kunting. So ako 2,400 yung binayad ko, si Ma'am Kunting nagbayad ng 600. A can recover reimbursement only to the extent that his payment exceeds his share. So ganito ang mangyayari. C is liable to him for 1,000. Si Ma'am Bella, may utang siya sa akin ng 1,000 kasi ako yung nag-shoulder ng bayad niya. Kasi sobra pa nga yung binayad ko kasi 2,400. Nagbayad ako para sa sarili ko 1,000, nagbayad pa ako kay Ma'am Bella ng 1,000. So, 2,000, tapos may sobra pa akong 400. Now, sabi dito, is liable si Ma'am Bella ng 1,000 and B for 400. So, si B, liable din siya sa akin ng 400 kasi 600 lang yung binayad niya. So, may utang din siya sa akin ng 400. Si Ma'am Bella, may utang sa akin ng 1,000. Si Ma'am Kunting, dahil 600 lang yung binayad niya, may utang pa siya sa akin ng 400. If C is insolvent, okay, si Ma'am Bella insolvent, B is liable to pay 900. So, kung insolvent si Ma'am Bella, liable si Ma'am Kunting magbabayad ng 900. Bakit? Dahil magkakaroon ng additional 500 yung babayaran niya. So, instead of 400 lang yung utang niya sa akin, magbabayad na siya ng 900 kasi babayaran niya pa yung kalahati doon kay Ma'am Bella na insolvent. Tapos ako, yung babayaran ko din, ako man din yung mag-shoulder muna ng 500. A is not entitled to reimbursement if his payment is 1,000 less. So, hindi siya magkakaroon ng reimbursement. Siyempre, kasi yung utang nila each is 1,000. So, kapag sobra lang yung binayad niya doon sa actual na debt niya, for example, more than 1,000, doon siya pwedeng humingi ng reimbursement. So D in the above example has the obligation to give E his corresponding share in the credit. So for example, okay na, settled na, naibigay na kay Ma'am Jehada yung bayad. So si Ma'am Jehada, since dalawa silang creditor ni Attorney Leong, ibibigay niya yung obligation kay Attorney Leong corresponding the share of the credit. So 3,000, ibibigay niya kay Attorney Leong 1,500, 1,515 sila each. Okay, next na ma'am. Okay na yan. Ano lang yan, mga cases. Next na sa 1218. Okay. Payment by a solidary debtor shall not entitle him to reimbursement from his co-debtor if such payment is made after the obligation has prescribed or become illegal. So, paano ito? Ang example dito, for example, ako at saka si Ma'am Kunti, nag-promise kami na magbigay kay Ma'am Bella ng 1 million worth of shabu. Example. So, after some time, nagkaroon ng batas, inatupad na magiging illegal yung ano tawag dyan? Yung, ano nga tawag dyan? Pagiging pusher, yung pagbigay ng shabu. So, therefore, illegal na yon. Pero, for example, ako yung nagbigay kay Ma'am Bella ng 1 million worth of shabu. Supposed to be, dalawa kami ni Ma'am Kunting magbigay ng shabu kay Ma'am Bella. Pero dahil ako muna yung nagbigay, 1 million, instead na 500,000 kami, and then nagkaroon ng batas na nagpapabawal sa pag-push ng shabu, ano mangyayari? Will Ma'am Kunting be liable to reimburse me the 500,000 worth of shabu? So hindi na. Basta naging illegal na siya, nalugi na ako kasi hindi ko na yun ma-reimburse. Or if the obligation has prescribed, if nagbayad, for example, ang due namin magbigay ng utang, for example, kay Ma'am Bella na 1 million, kami dalawa ni Ma'am Kunting may utang. Supposed to be magbayad kami June 5, yun ang due. Tapos nagbayad kami afterwards, instead of June 5, nakabayad ng August, tapos may pera na si Ma'am Kunting, so nagbayad siya ng 1 million, pwede pa rin ba niya yon i-reimburse sa akin? If the obligation has already prescribed, then the debtor will not be entitled for the reimbursement. That's what I understand.
Okay. Okay. So, ano tawag dito? Ano tawag dito? I think maganda yung discussion, no? Naintindihan ko naman, pero I think makakatulong if yung notes ay i-upload natin sa file, okay? So antayin ko yung sa'yo, Mariam, and then kay Ma'am Bella din.
Excel pa yun.
Tapos, oo. So, i-upload natin doon. Tapos, I think si Jehada ay nawalan ng net. So, I think we can call it a night, ma'am. No? Tapos,
Yes.
kung gusto niyang mag-record at her own convenience, tapos ma-upload niya bukas, walang problema, welcome yun. Kung gusto niya na i-postpone na din, pero ilagay niya na yung notes niya. I think the notes can really help, guys. Okay? Thank you.
Digested na daan.
Oo, I think mga 75%. Naintindihan ko naman.
Yes.
Okay
At least
na.
may bala na tayo for tomorrow.
Correct. Sige, thank you
Thank you.
guys.
Bye.
Good night.
Good night.